Chapter 38. O Happiness. From the country of Sakya, the Buddha entered the northern region of Kosala. He was accompanied by 120 bhikkhus, including many young men from noble families. They rested in a park near the city of Anapaya, which was home to the Mala people. Venerable Sariputta was traveling with the Buddha, as were Kaludai, Nanda, and the novice Rahula. Less than a month after the Buddha departed from the Kapilavatthu, two young men of the Sakya clan from a very wealthy family also considered leaving home to be ordained as bhikkhus. Their names were Mahanama and Anuruddha. Their family owned 3 magnificent residences, one for each season. Mahanama wanted to follow several of his friends who had become bhikkhus, but when he learned that his brother had similar thoughts, he changed his mind. There were only 2 sons in their family. He felt it would be a pity if both became monks. And so Mahanama yielded to his younger brother's desire and granted him the privilege of asking to be ordained. But when Narurada asked his mother for her permission, she protested, "My son, asks are my only happiness in this life. If you become a monk, I could not bear it." Anuruddha reminded her of the many other nobles who had already become bhikkhus. He told her how practicing the way could bring peace and happiness not only to the monk but to his family and society. Because Anuruddha listened to many of the Dharma talks the Buddha had given at Nagrada Park, he was able to speak eloquently about the teaching to his mother. Finally she said, "Very well, I will let you go, but only on the condition that your good friend Baddhiya decides to become a bhikkhu as well." She was certain that Baddhiya would never consider becoming a bhikkhu. He was also a member of the imperial clan and had commanded a high post. His vast responsibilities and his esteemed reputation would be difficult to abandon for the simple life of a monk. But Anuruddha lost no time in seeking out his friend. Baddhiya was the governor of the northern provinces. He had many soldiers under his command. Even his own palace was flanked day and night by armed guards. All day his quarters bustled with the comings and goings of important dignitaries. Baddhiya received Anuruddha as an honoured guest. Anuruddha told him, "I want to leave home and become a bhikkhu under the Buddha's guidance, but I cannot, and you are the reason why." Baddhiya laughed. "What do you mean? How have I ever prevented you from becoming a bhikkhu? Why, I would do anything I could to help you fulfill your wish." Anuruddha explained his predicament. He concluded by saying, "You have just said you would do anything you could to help me become a bhikkhu, but the only way is for you to become a bhikkhu yourself." Baddhiya felt caught. It wasn't that he did not also feel drawn to the Buddha and the path of awakening. In fact, he had secretly intended to become a bhikkhu at a later date, though certainly not at present. He said, "In 7 more years I will become a bhikkhu. Wait till then." "7 years is too long to wait. Who knows if I will even be alive then?" Baddhiya laughed. "What are you so pessimistic about? But very well, give me 3 years and I will become a bhikkhu." "Even 3 years is too long." "Very well, 7 months. I need to settle all my household arrangements and hand over my governing duties." Why should one about to abandon home to follow the way require so much time to settle his affairs? A bhikkhu freely leaves all behind in order to follow the path of freedom and liberation. If you take too long, you might change your mind." All right, my friend. Give me 7 days and I'll join you." Ecstatic, Anuruddha went home to inform his mother. She had not dreamed that Governor Baddhiya would so easily abandon his prestigious position. Suddenly she sensed the power of the path of liberation, and she felt better about letting her son leave home. Anuruddha persuaded a number of other friends to join him. They were Bhagu, Kimbali, Devadatta, and Ananda. They were all princes of the imperial clan. On the appointed day they gathered at Devadatta's house and set off in search of the Buddha. They were all of age except Ananda, who was still 18. But Ananda had received his father's permission to follow his elder brother, Devadatta. The 6 princes travelled by carriage until they reached a small town close to the Kosala border. They had heard that the Buddha was staying near Anupaya. Anuruddha suggested that they get rid of their jewels and ornaments before they crossed the border. They all removed their necklaces, rings and bangles and wrapped them in a cloak. They agreed to find some poor person to give them to. They noticed a tiny barber shop by the side of the road, which was run by a young man about their own age. He was an attractive fellow, but shabbily dressed. Anuruddha entered his shop and asked him his name. The young barber replied, Upali. Anuruddha asked Upali if he would direct them across the border. Upali gladly led them there himself. Before they left him, they handed in the cloak containing the precious jewels and ornaments. Anuruddha said, Upali, we intend to follow the Buddha and live as bhikkhus. We have no more use of these jewels. We would like to give them to you. With these you will have enough to live in leisure the rest of your days. The princes bid Upali farewell and crossed the border. When the young barber opened up the cloak, the glint of gems and gold dazzled his eyes. He belonged to the lowest caste in society. No one in his family had ever owned so much as an ounce of gold or even a single ring. Now he had an entire cloak of precious gems. But instead of being happy, he was suddenly seized with panic. He clasped the bundle tightly in his arms. All his former feelings of well-being disappeared. He knew there were many people who would kill to get at the contents of the cloak. Upali reflected. The young noblemen who had enjoyed great wealth and power were giving it all up in order to become monks. No doubt they had come to see the dangers and burdens that wealth and fame can bring. Suddenly he too wanted to cast the bundle aside and follow the princes in pursuit of true peace, joy and liberation. Without a moment's hesitation, he hung the bundle on a nearby branch for the first passer-by to claim, and then he too crossed the border. Before long he caught up with the young nobles. Surprised to see Upali running after them, Devadatta asked, Upali, why are you running after us? Where's the bundle of gems we gave you? Upali caught his breath and explained how he tied the bundle to a tree to be claimed by the first passer-by. He said he didn't feel at ease with such riches and wanted to join them in becoming a bhikkhu under the guidance of the Buddha. Devadatta laughed. You want to become a bhikkhu, but you are... Anuruddha cut Devadatta off. Wonderful, wonderful. We would be pleased if you would join us. The Buddha teaches that the Sangha is like a great sea, and the bhikkhus are like many rivers that flow into the sea, becoming one with it. Though we may be born into different castes, once we join the Sangha, we are all brothers with no distinctions dividing us. Baddhiya extended his hand to shake Upali's. He introduced himself as the former governor of the northern provinces of Sakya. He introduced the other princes to Upali, who bowed deeply to each one. Together the 7 young men continued on their way. When they reached Anupaya the next day and were told that the Buddha was staying in a forest 2 miles northeast of the city, they made their way to the forest and there met the Buddha. Baddhiya spoke on behalf of the group. The Buddha nodded his acceptance of the request to be ordained. Baddhiya also said, we would like to ask that Upali be ordained first. We will then bow to Upali as our elder brother in the Dharma, releasing any vestiges of false pride and discrimination that may remain in us. The Buddha ordained Upali first. Because Ananda was only 18, he took the vows of a novice to prepare for full ordination when he reached 20 years of age. Ananda was now the youngest member of the Sangha next to Rahula. Rahula was delighted to see Ananda. 3 days after their ordination, they departed with the Buddha and the other bhikkhus and headed towards Vasali, where they rested 3 days in Mahana Park. After that, it took them 10 days to reach Bamboo Forest Monastery, in Rajagaha. Venerables Kassapa, Moggallana, and Kondana were happy to see the Buddha again, as were all 6 bhikkhus living at Bamboo Forest. King Bimbisara lost no time in paying the Buddha a visit as soon as he learned of his arrival. The atmosphere at Bamboo Forest was happy and warm. The rainy season was fast approaching, and Venerables Kondana and Kassapa were well prepared. This was the 3rd rainy season since the Buddha's awakening. He spent the first at the deer park and the second at Bamboo Forest. Before Baddhiya accepted the governor's post, he had wholeheartedly studied spiritual matters. Now, under Venerable Kassapa's guidance at Bamboo Forest, he devoted heart and mind to his practice, spending almost all his time meditating. He preferred sleeping beneath the trees to sleeping in a hut. One night, while sitting in meditation beneath a tree, he experienced a happiness greater than any he had ever known. He exclaimed, "Oh happiness, oh happiness!" Another bhikkhu sitting nearby heard Baddhiya call out. The next morning, this same bhikkhu reported to the Buddha, "Lord, late last night while I was sitting in meditation, I heard Bhikkhu Baddhiya suddenly call out, 'Oh happiness, oh happiness!' It appears he misses the wealth and fame he left behind. I thought it best to tell you." The Buddha only nodded. After the noon meal, the Buddha gave a Dharma talk. When he was finished, he asked Bhikkhu Baddhiya to come forward before the community, which also included many lay disciples. The Buddha asked him, "Baddhiya, late last night while sitting in meditation, did you call out, 'Oh happiness, oh happiness'?" Baddhiya joined his palms and answered, "Teacher, last night I did indeed call out those very words." "Can you tell us why?" "Lord, when I was the governor, I lived a life of fame, power, and wealth. Everywhere I went, I was flanked by 4 soldiers for protection. My palace was never without armed guards, day and night. Even so, there was never a moment I felt safe. I was almost constantly filled with fear and anxiety, but now I can walk and sit alone in the deep forest. I know no fear of anxiety. Instead, I feel ease, peace, and joy, just as I never felt before. Teacher, living the life of a bhikkhu brings me such great happiness and contentment. I am no longer afraid of anyone or of losing anything. I am as happy as a deer living freely in the forest. Last night, during my meditation, this became so clear to me that I exclaimed, 'Oh happiness, oh happiness!' Please forgive me for any disturbance it caused you and the other bhikkhus." The Buddha praised Baddhiya before the entire community. "It is wonderful, Baddhiya. You have made great strides on the path of self-contentment and detachment. The peace and joy you feel is the peace and joy to which even the gods aspire." During the rainy season retreat, the Buddha ordained many new bhikkhus, including a talented young man named Mahakassapa. Mahakassapa was the son of the richest man in Magadha. His father's wealth was exceeded only by the national treasury. Mahakassapa was married to a woman from Vasali named Bhadra Kapilani. They had lived as husband and wife for 12 years, but both longed to follow the spiritual path. Early one morning, Mahakassapa awoke before his wife. Suddenly he noticed a poisonous snake creeping beside his wife's arm that was hanging over the side of the bed. Mahakassapa did not dare breathe for fear of startling the snake. It slowly crept past Kapilani's arm and out of the room. Mahakassapa woke his wife up and told her what had just taken place. Together they reflected on the uncertainty and transiency of life. Kapilani urged Mahakassapa to seek a teacher without delay in order to study the way. Because he had heard about the Buddha, he went at once to Bamboo Forest. The moment he saw the Buddha, he understood that the Buddha was his true teacher. The Buddha could easily see that Mahakassapa was a man of rare depth and he ordained him. Mahakassapa told the Buddha of his wife's longing to become a nun and follow the way, but the Buddha answered that the time was not yet ripe to admit women into the Sangha and that she would need to wait a little longer. Chapter 39, Waiting for Daybreak. 3 days after the rainy season ended, a young man named Siddhartha paid a visit to the Buddha to ask if he would come teach the way of awakening in Kosala. Siddhartha was an extremely wealthy merchant. He lived in the capital city, Savatthi, in the kingdom of Kosala, which was ruled by King Pasandani. Siddhartha was known to his country people as a philanthropist who always set aside a generous portion of his income to share with orphans and the destitute. His charitable efforts gave him much satisfaction and happiness. His people called him Anathapindika, which means the one who cares for the poor and abandoned. Siddhartha travelled frequently to Magadha to buy and sell goods. When in Rajagaha, he stayed with his wife's elder brother, who was also a merchant. His brother-in-law always treated him with the greatest affection, assuring that every detail of his stay was pleasant. He was staying with his brother-in-law at the end of the rainy season. Unlike usual, his brother-in-law did not cater to many of his needs. Instead, he busily directed family, friends, and servants in preparation for some great feast. Siddhartha was surprised to arrive and find the household in the midst of so much activity. He asked if they were preparing to hold a wedding or death anniversary observance. The brother-in-law answered, "Tomorrow I have invited the Buddha and his bhikkhus for a meal." Siddhartha asked with some surprise, "Doesn't Buddha mean one who is awake?" "That is right. The Buddha is an awakened person. He is an enlightened master. He is wondrous and radiant. Tomorrow you will have a chance to meet this wonderful person." He could not explain why, but just hearing the name Buddha filled Siddhartha with happiness and inspiration. He sat his brother-in-law down and asked to hear more about this enlightened teacher. The brother-in-law explained how after watching the serene bhikkhus beg in the city, he'd gone to hear the Buddha at Bamboo Forest Monastery. He had become one of the Buddha's lay disciples and had even built a number of thatched huts at the monastery as an offering, in order to protect the bhikkhus from the sun and rain. He had overseen the building of 60 huts in a single day. Perhaps, Siddhartha marveled, it was from a past life connection, but he felt great love and respect for the Buddha well within his heart. He could not wait until the following noon to meet the Buddha. He spent a restless night anxiously waiting for daybreak so that he could pay a morning visit to Bamboo Forest Monastery. 3 times he arose from his bed to see if it was dawn yet, but each time the sky was still dark. Unable to sleep any more, he got up anyway. He dressed, slipped into his shoes, and walked out the door. The air was cold and misty. He passed through Savaka Gate and made his way to Bamboo Forest. By the time he arrived, the first rays of morning light were shining on the bamboo leaves. Though he wanted nothing more than to meet the Buddha, he felt somewhat nervous. To calm himself, he whispered, "Siddhartha, do not worry." At that very moment, the Buddha, who was doing walking meditation, passed Siddhartha. He stopped and said softly, "Siddhartha." Siddhartha joined his palms and bowed before the Buddha. They walked to the Buddha's hut, and Siddhartha asked the Buddha if he had slept well. The Buddha replied he had. Siddhartha told the Buddha how restless a night he had spent. So anxious was he to come and meet the Buddha. He asked the Buddha to teach him the way. The Buddha spoke to Siddhartha about understanding and love. Siddhartha was filled with great happiness. He prostrated before the Buddha and asked to become a lay disciple. The Buddha accepted him. Siddhartha also invited the Buddha and all his bhikkhus to come to have a meal the following day at the home of his brother-in-law. The Buddha laughed gently. My bhikkhus and I have already been invited to eat there today. There is no reason we should expect to eat there tomorrow too. Siddhartha said, Today my brother-in-law will host you. Tomorrow shall be my offering. I regret I do not have a house of my own in Rajagaha. I entreat you to accept my invitation. The Buddha smiled his acceptance. Overjoyed, Siddhartha bowed again and then quickly returned home to assist his brother-in-law with preparations for that day's meal offering. When Siddhartha heard more of the Buddha's teaching at his brother-in-law's home, his happiness knew no bounds. He accompanied the Buddha and the bhikkhus to the gate when the teaching was finished, and at once began to prepare for the following day's meal offering. His brother-in-law joined his efforts with enthusiasm, and even said, Siddhartha, you are still my guest. Why don't you let me take care of all the preparations? But Siddhartha would not hear of it. He insisted on taking care of all the expenses himself, only agreeing to let the family help ready the home and cook some of the dishes. When Siddhartha heard more of the Buddha's teaching the next day, his heart opened like a flower. He knelt down and said, Lord Buddha, the people of Kosala have not yet had an opportunity to welcome you and your Sangha, and to learn the way of awakening. Please consider my invitation for you to come to Kosala and spend a period of time. Please show compassion to the people of Kosala. The Buddha agreed to discuss the idea with his senior disciples. He promised to give Siddhartha a response within a few days. A few days later, Siddhartha visited Bamboo Forest Monastery and received the happy news that the Buddha had decided to accept his invitation. The Buddha asked him if there would be some suitable place near Savatthi where a large community of bhikkhus could dwell. Siddhartha assured him that he would find a place and would provide for all the Sangha's needs while they were there. Siddhartha also suggested that the Buddha allow Venerable Sariputta to come to Kosala with him first in order to assist in preparations for the Buddha's arrival. The Buddha asked Sariputta whether or not he would like that, and Sariputta replied he would be happy to go. A week later, Siddhartha came to Bamboo Forest where he met Sariputta. They set off together, crossing the Ganga and travelling to Vaisali, where they were met by Ambapali, and they rested the night in her mango grove. Sariputta told her that she could expect the Buddha and a large number of bhikkhus to pass through Vaisali on their way to Kosala in another 6 months. Ambapali said she would be most happy to offer them food and a place to sleep. She told Sariputta and Siddhartha that she was most honoured to receive them as guests. She commended the young merchant on his many charitable works and encouraged him in his efforts to have the Buddha bring the teaching to Kosala. After bidding farewell to Ambapali, they headed northwest along the banks of the Achiravati River. Siddhartha had never walked such distances before, having always used a carriage in the past. Everywhere they stopped, he announced to people that the Buddha and his Sangha would be travelling through the land, and he asked the people to welcome him. The Buddha is an awakened master. Prepare to welcome him and his Sangha with jubilation. Kosala was a large and prosperous kingdom, no less powerful than Magadha. Its southern border was marked by the Ganga, and its northern border brushed the feet of the Himalayas. Siddhartha, or Anathapindika, was known to everyone wherever they went. The people trusted what he told them, and they all looked forward to meeting the Buddha and his Sangha. Every morning when Venerable Sariputta went begging, Siddhartha accompanied him to speak to as many people as he could about the Buddha. They reached Savatthi after a month. Siddhartha invited Sariputta to his home for a meal and introduced him to his parents and wife. He asked Sariputta to speak about the Dharma, after which his parents and wife asked to take the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts. Siddhartha's wife was a lovely and graceful woman. Her name was Punakana. They had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. The daughters were named Subhadra elder, Subhadra younger, Sumagada, and their son, the youngest child, was named Rala. Sariputta begged every morning in the city and slept in the forest by the banks of the river at night. Siddhartha lost no time in searching for a place to host the Buddha and the bhikkhus. And that, dear friend, is the end of our reading for today.